Hey everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're making the Poolside tote from Noodlehead. Now, this is not a small bag. Let me just show you the bag. This is a bag, right? This is a big bag. I'm going somewhere fun bag. This is not meant to be like your everyday going to the grocery store bag. Although this would be great for the grocery store because you could just put everything in it. It is a sturdy bag. It is a nice big bag. It has an open top. So let's just go through the features real quick. On the front here, we have a zip pocket. This is optional. You can make this a slip pocket or a zip pocket. There are instructions for both. I'm going to show you how to make the zip pocket today just because it's slightly more challenging, but it's actually very simple. So if you have never done a zipper before, this would be a great first zipper project. There's not a whole lot to it. It's quick, it's easy, it's clean. So you see, open it up. So this would just be where I would put, like my wallet, my cash, my credit card, things like that, like smaller items right here. This pocket is great for a feature panel, so a feature piece of fabric, but when you're picking it out or cutting out your fabric, you want to remember the bottom gets boxed. So as you can see, when I was cutting out my fabric, I was centering the design on the fabric cut instead of on the top piece here. So I'm hoping I can help you avoid that mistake today. You can see we have these accents that go down the side. I did use vinyl for this, which was a little bit thicker. I would encourage you to not use a thick material for that. For the straps and also for these things here, I would use a thinner vinyl or just a quilt cotton that has some interfacing on it, with like woven interfacing. The back is just this, so if you wanted to skip this front pocket altogether, you don't need it, then you can just make the back and the front look exactly the same. That's an incredibly chic, very basic bag. It's beautiful. To finish this off, we have a little bit of binding up here, which is a very unique way of closing off these edges up here. I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to walk you through it. It's not hard, but you will be sewing from the inside, so you want to make sure you pay attention to your bobbin thread today and make sure your bobbin thread is a color that it's going to look okay on the exterior. We have folded handles here. I'm going to walk you through how to do it. It's very easy. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. You can leave them nice and flat like they are on the sides here. And then that's it. On the inside, we don't have any pockets. You can definitely add a pocket. You could add a mesh slip pocket. You could add a zipper pocket. There's a lot of freedom here, but if you want to just leave it open like this, that's what I'm going to do, because personally, I'm using this bag here as my pool bag. So when we go to like our local pool, I'll put my towels in it. I'll put some bathing suits in it. I used vinyl, a little bit of quilt cotton on the exterior, and then I used waterproof canvas for the lining, which I'm going to be using again today because if I'm going to be putting wet things in there, I don't want to worry about like quilt cotton getting all soggy. However, I am using quilt cotton for the binding strip at the top because it's easiest to work with, and I'm not too worried about that little bit getting wet. So thank you so much to Anna over at Noodlehead for allowing me to use your patterns in my tutorials. I love, 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 love Noodlehead patterns. You all know that. They're a big favorite on the channel. This is, again, a bag that looks pretty challenging, right? When you finish this, when you see it, it looks store-bought. It definitely does not look handmade. But it looks like, I don't know. I would say this is beginner friendly. Personally, I would say it is. There are some very unique techniques we're going to be learning today. I bet some of you guys have never done certain things we're going to be doing today, but I want you to give them a try. I'm a creature of habit, so when I see, like little techniques for basting and then pulling the threads, I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that because it's not something I normally do. But trust me, give it a try. It's gonna make it, it's quick, it's easy. I wouldn't give you guys a technique that's gonna take a lot longer and be really complicated. I'm gonna share with you guys the techniques that I think are great, and everyone that she has in this pattern today is fantastic, which obviously, she's a professional, right? She knows what she's doing here. So, thank you so much again to Noodlehead for allowing me to film today's tutorial. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, bag's going down, please give it a like. If you have any questions, comments, anything at all, leave them down in the comment section. I will have timestamps for every single step of today's tutorial. They'll be in the description of this video. They'll also be along the bottom here. There's little chapters, so you can just click where you want to go, and it'll take you straight there in the video. Let me hold on. Let me just show you this bag on real quick so you can see like the size. Okay, so you can see it's a nice shoulder bag. It comes just at my hip. It's nice and big. The shoulder strap is nice and thick because if you're going to load it up with a lot of stuff, you want to make sure it's not going to kill your shoulder with like cutting it in there with a really thin strap, So for a shoulder strap, like waterproof canvas would be really great. If you're gonna use quilt cotton, again, you just wanna make sure you add that woven interfacing because you don't want it to be too thin because it's going to, it could take a lot of weight since it is such a big bag. You can also wear this on your elbow if you wanted to, just like that. Just carry it as a tote, which is what it is. I mean, you can wear this a lot of different ways. I think the size of it, the shape of it, having this cutout hole right here is really, really helpful. If it was flat like that, you wouldn't have a whole lot of space to like stick your arm. It would be like right in your armpit, and nobody needs that, especially when it's hot outside. So this cutout is just perfect. It makes it a very comfortable bag to wear. All right, this is gonna be a fun one, guys. Let's get started. Okay, so here is all the material we're using today. From my exterior fabric, you're going to need 1 1/4 yards. Now this is a big cut, so you're gonna make sure you have big cuts. I am using vinyl, but it is a thinner, lightweight vinyl. For this exterior piece, this is like the big, outside of the bag, just 2 big panels really. You can get away with a thicker vinyl here. It doesn't have to be really, really thin, but you're gonna need a lot of it. For your accent fabric, you're going to need 3/4 yard. Now I'm mixing it up. For my front pocket and the pocket lining, I'm going to be using this cotton woven here. And then for the handles and the straps, I'm using a thin vinyl. Now this vinyl, for those handles and the little straps that go along the side of the bag, you're going to want it to be a thinner vinyl or use canvas or cotton woven that has interfacing on it, like some SF101 interfacing on it. You want the handles to be durable enough to be able to hold a very heavy bag. But you also are going to be sewing a lot of folds in these seams. So if it gets too bulky and you don't have an industrial machine, you might be in trouble. So I will just tell you on this one, this vinyl is a little bit thicker, a little bit stiffer. I did enlist the help of my industrial machine on some of this because I was worried about my sewing machine. Now again, with the right needle and the right tension, you'd probably be okay. But I don't want you guys to get to a point in this bag today where you're like, my machine can't sew that level of thickness. So I'm going to give you tips along the way in case you do run into that problem, what you can do and ways you can adjust this. But just to get started, a thin vinyl or waterproof canvas is going to be great for the straps today. For the lining, I am using all waterproof canvas. I actually didn't have enough of the one color to do both the big lining pieces, so I'm using 2 different colors for my lining. It'll be fine. You're gonna want 1 1/4 yards of this because these panels are so big. So you're gonna make sure it's 1 1/4 continuous yards. Don't like chop it up into pieces. Unless you want 2 pieces of vinyl that are different colors like I do, then you do whatever you want. And then I have like a little piece of scrap here. There's a little key ring option to put on the inside of the bag. I actually made it for my previous bag and forgot to put it in the bag when I was constructing it. So today we're gonna try to make sure it makes it in that bag. If you're using any quilt cotton or cotton canvas material today, you're gonna wanna add some SF101 to it. You're gonna wanna make sure it doesn't stretch, it doesn't fray, and that it has enough beef to hold a lot of stuff. This is an easy pattern, but it is a big bag, and big bags tend to hold a lot of stuff, which means they get heavy. We want everything to be rip-proof here. If you're using waterproof canvas, you do not have to add SF101 to that. I know we get confused sometimes with the canvas talks. Cotton canvas can fray and shred. Waterproof canvas already has that nice plastic coating on the back of it. You don't have to add anything to it. So any pieces that are quilt cotton or cotton canvas or cotton lycra even, you're gonna wanna add some SF101 to the back of it. So you might need up to 3 yards of this, honestly, depending on how much of that material you're using. All right, here's a bunch of the other things you might find useful today. Obviously, clips. We use these all the time with bag making. They're great because they don't pierce holes in your fabric. So if you're using vinyl, that's especially helpful. If you're doing the zipper pocket, you're gonna want a 10-inch zipper and a zipper pull. I'm just using zipper tape today and I'll cut it down. If you're not doing the zipper pocket, you don't need any zippers. Isn't that great? If you don't wanna do zippers, you don't have to do zippers. Make a slip pocket or just leave off the exterior pocket completely and you're good to go. If you want, you can add a D-ring or even one of these swivel hooks to the inside of the bag. And I might actually use a swivel hook today because it's nice to just have it hanging on the seam inside the bag and you can just quickly clip your keys to it. No problem, and that way you don't have to go digging around in a big bag for, the keys to the car. For my top thread today, which is going to be going through the needle on the top of my machine, I'm using this beautiful thread from Wizardry Stitchery. This is a Tex 45 weight thread. So it works fine on my Bernina 770 QE, and I'll be using an 80-12 needle most of the time. Now, this might be too thick for other domestic machines, so you're gonna wanna get a Tex 35 if you can find it with them. For the bobbin thread, I'm using a Mara 100 weight thread. My bobbin thread can't be this thick. It has to be a thinner thread. But for one part in the very end of our bag, this bobbin thread is going to show through on the front. So I do suggest you use a bobbin thread that is the same color as your exterior fabric, especially if you're not very good at top stitching and keeping lines straight. Use a thread color that's the same as your exterior fabric. Like I said, I have these 80-12 needles. I also have some 90-14 needles on standby in case my seams get really thick. I always suggest having both of these if you're bag making. 80-12s we use pretty much 99% of the time. When it gets kind of tricky, kind of hairy, kind of thick, we enlist the help of the 90-14s. I have two marking tools. I have a friction marker. This can only be used on the back of fabrics and in the seams. It does not really erase, so you don't want to use it on the front side of fabric. And then I have a vinyl marking tool, which is just a silver pen. I have a glue stick here, which can be very helpful. A chalk marker as well. My double-sided wash-away tape that's easy to sew over. It doesn't gum up my needle. I have some washi tape here to help me mark placement for things when I don't want to use the pens. I have a small pair of snips for getting close to all those little threads as we're working. And then my fabric scissors are these nice Kai scissors. All right, so now let's go over all the pattern pieces. The main pattern piece is this big guy here. You're gonna have about 6 pieces of paper you're gonna be taping together and cutting to make this pattern piece, so hold on to that. So we have two exterior cuts. I'm using this beautiful vinyl. I have a link for it down below. It sells out so fast, but if you can ever get it, get it. It's wonderful, wonderful vinyl, and it's very easy to work with. And then for my lining, I have the same cuts. I'm using waterproof canvas. Like I said, I have two different colors because I just couldn't find enough of the same color. So that'll be fine. It'll be fun. If any of these pieces are quill cotton, cotton lycra, cotton canvas, anything that frays or stretches, you want to make sure you interface it with your SF101. She also mentions in the pattern that if you really want a beautiful firm finish to your bag, add some sew-in foam. So I use the By Annie Soft and Stable. If you add 2 cuts of that and you just baste it onto your exterior cuts here, oh my gosh, that bag would be just like a big old pillow, but it would be fantastic. So I honestly might make another version using that because I think that that's gonna be really cool. Okay, let's go over the other 2 pattern pieces we have. Let me tell you, the prep time for this is going to be what takes the most time. Sewing this together really doesn't take a long time, but prepping all the pieces does take a little bit of time. So you're gonna have 2 of these tote facings. This is going to be the binding that covers up the raw edges of the top of the bag later. So you're gonna have 1 cut of fabric. I do suggest a lightweight fabric for this. So I have quill cotton here, and then it's going to be interfaced with your woven interfacing. As you can see, I already prepped this piece here, so I will walk you through how to do that. But you're gonna need 2 cuts of your quill cotton or whatever material you're using for your tote facing. For your handle accent piece, you're gonna need 4 cuts total, 2 going one way, 2 going the other way. So you're gonna have 2 mirrored, right? So here you can see I've already prepped 3 of them, and I'll show you how to prep this one in just a moment. But you're going to cut out your pattern piece like this for 2 of them, and then you're gonna flip over your pattern piece and cut out the other 2 just like that. That's all you need. Just make sure you have 2 of each mirrored side. You know what I mean? You know what I mean. You got it. And here are our other cuts. These don't have pattern pieces. These are just measurements. These are your 2 cuts here for your front pocket. Now remember, you're gonna lose a chunk of this bottom. So whenever you're picking your design here, center it and then keep it up higher. Don't have it centered right here because it'll get cut off. So you can see whenever we fold this down, now my design will be centered on the pocket. Just think about that. So for my exterior pocket, the part that's gonna be seen, I have a piece of quill cotton and it is interfaced with my woven interfacing. My quill cotton lining piece, however, is not interfaced. It doesn't need to be, it can be looser. If you wanna interface it, definitely go ahead and do that. That's choices up to you. I then have a cut that I'm going to make a little piece of binding for the top of my zipper. This is only necessary if you're making the zipper. If you're making the slip pocket, then you just need these 2 and you're done. But this piece up here is not interfaced. It doesn't need to be. It's gonna be very thin and folded a few times, so it's fine. Next, I have my cuts from my handle. Again, I'm using a very lightweight vinyl. So you can see, I've already made 1 of them. You're going to be folding this and folding this and folding this and folding this and then sewing it. So if it's thick, your machine might have problems. If you have an industrial machine, go ahead and use whatever you want. But if you are using a domestic machine, you're probably going to want to use a thinner material. So if you're using quilt cotton or cotton canvas, you're definitely going to want to just interface that with your SF101 before you make these straps. Waterproof canvas would also be a great option for these straps. So the first thing we want to do is prep our handle accents. You can see I've already got 3 of them prepped here. What you're going to do is you're going to flip your piece of fabric over so you're looking at the wrong side. And before you start marking, you're going to want to mark the top. So the bottom is the straight edge. I know they're both straight, but you can see the top is like an angled straight. So you're going to want to make sure you mark the top. If you get confused, the way that this is written is the top. So you see this right here would be the top. When you line it up, that's the top. So mark the tops of all of these first so you don't get confused later. Now the pattern's going to have you baste a line 1/2 of an inch in using the sewing machine to help you line up how you're going to fold this in. I'm going to show you that method in another piece of this, but for this right here, what I do is I take a ruler and I just mark these dashed lines that are 1 inch from the sides. So I'm going to do both sides. I'm going to show you one at a time. So along this left side here, I already marked little dashes, and these are all 1 inch away from this raw edge here. I'm then going to grab a glue stick, and I'm going to glue just inside those dashed lines. Not all the way because it'll dry, but just about that far, about 1/3 of it. And then I'm going to fold the raw edge up, wrong sides together, so that the raw edge meets that dashed line. And I'm going to add clips. Now the combination of the glue and the clips will help this stay in place just long enough for me to attach it to my bag. So you can see I'm just folding up, wrong sides together, letting that raw edge meet those dashed lines, pushing down on the glue, and then adding a clip so that it dries like that. And then once I get to where I've run out of glue, I'm just going to use my glue stick again and add more. And you can use any type of glue stick here. You can use an Elmer's glue stick too, that will be fine. You could use double-sided tape here. I like to use that really sticky leather double-sided tape for this part, but it can be difficult to sew over at your machine, so I wanted to give you guys another option. There we go. So now I've got one side glued down, so I'm going to grab my ruler and I'm going to mark 1 inch in from the right side now. So once again, 1 inch in from the edge. All right, once I have those dashed lines marked, I'm once again going to add my glue for about 1/3 of it, and then just fold up wrong sides together. And I mark in 1 inch because I want to fold in 1/2 of an inch. So I'm making 1/2 of an inch seam here. All right, and that's how I prep this strap. So we just want to leave it like this for now because then we're going to sew it onto the bag later. So make sure you do that for all 4 of them and then set these to the side. All right, next we're going to work on our straps. So you're going to take your strap piece, and it's a pretty big piece, you know, it's pretty wide, and you're going to flip it wrong side up, and you're going to mark a midpoint line going down the center. And then take the raw long edges of your strap and fold them up wrong sides together so that they meet with that midpoint line. And depending on your material, you can press this with an iron or you can just use some clips like I am. All right, once you have both of those raw edges folded in towards the middle, then you're just going to fold the whole thing in half so that those raw edges are tucked in just like that. So now you're going to have 2 folded edges on one side and 1 folded edge on the other side, and there's only going to be raw edges on the short bottom and top. Okay, now we can take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along both of these long folded edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have this prepped, you're going to measure in 7 inches from each edge in towards the center. So it's hard to see, but I used my little vinyl pen here to mark a line that is 7 inches in. So you're going to want to use some sort of an air erasing marker, water erasing marker, something that will come off. So since this is so hard for me to see, what I'm going to use is some washi tape as well. So I have right here, I have my 7-inch line marked. I'm going to grab a small piece of washi tape and I'm going to put this just outside of it, so towards the raw edge. So I'm going to put it outside, running right along that 7-inch mark, just like that, okay? So my line is right here along the right edge of my tape. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm placing my tape just to the outside, closer to the raw edge of that marked line. And this just allows me to see where that mark line is better. And with washi tape, I can sew over this and still remove it from the stitches. It's fine. So now you're gonna take your strap and you're gonna fold it wrong sides together. So this is where it gets pretty thick. If you use certain material, it can be a little tricky here. So you're gonna fold this wrong sides together. So for me, my tape should be seen on the fold just like that. And you're gonna clip it together. So just give it a nice pinch with your fingers. You might have to really like kind of shove that bottom layer of vinyl or whatever fabric you're using in there to get it to roll nicely. Just take some time to manipulate it with your hands. And then I like to clip beyond my marks as well. I figure that makes it a little bit easier to sew. So I'm gonna clip outside of it as well. All right, so this is what I have now. I have it folded right in the center, and I have my tape to mark where I need to sew. I'm gonna sew in between my marked tapes. So starting on the inside of my tape, I'm gonna do one stitch forward, and I'm gonna back stitch one stitch. And then I'm gonna go all the way until I get to the beginning of my other tape. I'm not gonna go past it, and I'm going to back stitch once, and then one stitch forward to end it. I'm top stitching, and I'm just tracing over the top stitching I've already made. This is how we're gonna hold together this rolled seam. If you find at this point you can't even get your clips to hold this in place because it's too thick, just don't worry about it. You don't have to roll these handles. It is a nicer look, but you can leave them flat. Don't feel like you have to like trash the project because you can't do this one step. If you can't get it to roll, if your machine is not gonna sew over this, just leave them flat, you'll be fine. All right, there we go. We have that stitched down, so now we can remove our extra clips. And then just pull off your washi tape if you added it. And there you go. That's how you do that cute little rolled handle. Just do this for both of your straps, and then we can put these to the side. Okay, next up is probably the part that most of you are hesitant about. And you don't need to be. We can do this. So to prepare this facing, what we're gonna do is we're gonna fold under the bottom edge here 1/2 of an inch. Now, you can do this the same way we did those accent straps. You could mark 1 inch from the bottom edge of this entire thing and then fold it up and glue it. That's what I did on my first bag. I just glued it. I didn't baste it. I didn't pull it. I didn't do with the method I'm gonna show you. So if you don't wanna do this, use some double stick tape, use some glue, fold it up, press it. However you get this folded up 1/2 of an inch is going to be fine. But I'm gonna show you how she explains it in the pattern because it's a really cool way to do this. It's easy. So what we're gonna do is we're going to take our facing to the sewing machine, and we are going to baste along the bottom edge, not the top edge, the bottom edge only around the whole thing at 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. A basting stitch is going to be 5 millimeters or more because later we will be removing these stitches from the bag. So 5 millimeters or more, 1/2 of an inch along the bottom edge here. All right, once you have that basting stitch done, now we're gonna do another basting stitch, but we're only gonna do it along the rounded bottom here. This is going to be a step that helps us pinch this bottom right here and fold it over so we don't have any big pleats. It's supposed to make it easier. If it doesn't make it easier, then just fold it and glue it. You'll be fine. You can just flip this over, fold along this edge here, just fold right along those stitches so the fold is actually on the stitches, and glue this down, press it however you need. But if you're struggling with that, let's try this basting step here. So now we're gonna go back to the sewing machine and we're just going to baste again at a 5 millimeter or bigger stitch length right along this bottom curved edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, only from here to here, okay? That's it, corner to corner. Okay, so once you have that basted on, flip this over, and you're going to take your bobbin thread and you're going to gently pull it, and you'll see the fabric starts to pucker around it, right? So what you do is you pull it a little bit, and then you just kind of pull that fabric down to try to continue the pucker all along to the center. It doesn't have to be a lot. This isn't a big gathering, it's just a little bit. So do this on the other side as well. So you had to have left your tails for your bobbin thread and your top thread nice and long, and then just pull along it gently. You don't want to rip it here. So once you pull it, you might find you can't pull it any longer, and it's like, why isn't this gathering up down here, because it won't. You have to spread the gather. So you push the gather down towards the center. See? Just like that. And then you can pull a little bit more on your bobbin thread and then spread the gather down. Okay? There you go. Now, before we get too carried away with this, grab your scissors. You don't want to cut your threads here for your 1/4 inch basting stitch, okay? And you're going to cut into this corner right here about 1/8 of an inch from your basting stitch that you made at the top. So that 1/2 of an inch basting stitch. So I'm going past the basting stitches that I'm using to gather the fabric right here, but I'm not cutting them because I need them. So I'm going to move those threads out of the way. And if you find you need to, go ahead and remove a stitch or two so that you can really cut into that corner. So for example, I just removed a stitch here because it was blocking the way for me to cut into this corner. But I'm not cutting my threads, just the fabric, till I'm about 1/8 of an inch away from the corner of my basting stitches that are 1/2 of an inch in, okay? Here we go. So essentially what we're gonna do is we're going to take the flat edges here and we're gonna fold them up, wrong sides together, right on that 1/2 of an inch basting stitch. So those stitches should be right along the edge of our fold. For that, you might want to use some glue, or you can just use an iron. I will be using an iron as well. So there we go. I'm going to use some glue for now, and then I'll still press that with an iron as well to help set it. And I'm just folding right along the stitching. The basting stitches are on the fold. I'm going to do this with the other flat edge as well. You could also use tape here if you prefer using some double-sided tape. You could just press it with an iron, that would also be fine. So now going back to the center here, you can see I'm still kind of gathering. I have this straight bottom right here. I want to get that gathered as well. So I'm just going to pull a little bit again on my bobbin thread and then just pinch down the gathers to spread it towards the middle, see? With sewing, just like with many things, if you're putting too much force into this, it's just going to frustrate you, things are going to break, and it's not going to work. The more gentle you are, the better it's going to be. So now you see, as it gathers, it starts to bowl up like that. We're going to let it do that. And what we're trying to do is, just like we did on the edges here, we're folding along that 1/2 of an inch baseline, just like this. And the gather is helping us do this. So if it's too pleated, if it's too gathered, just kind of loosen it up a little bit, just so you can get a nice round fold right on that 1/2 of an inch basted stitch, just like that. And you guys, you know what? It doesn't have to be perfect. This isn't going to line up with anything like a puzzle piece. This is just going to be top stitched on in the end, and it's going to be on the inside of the bag. So there you can see I have this pressed down with my fingers, and I kind of loosen up the gather where it's a little too gathered, and then I'll move it to another area. There you go. Okay, now the part that really helps if you're using quilt cotton for this is ironing it. So let's grab our iron and just press right along that curved edge, and this will help just flatten everything out really nicely. You shouldn't have any weird pleats anywhere. It should be pretty smooth. I'm going to press along the edges that are glued down as well. That will help set them. If you make clothes, this is probably a pretty simple step for you, but for us bag makers, this whole gathering thing can be kind of intimidating. Okay, so you see when I turn it to the right side, just like that, now we have the bottom edges folded under, nice and clean, and then later we will remove the basting stitches. So now you're going to take both of your facing pieces and lay them right sides together. And we're going to match up the short edges. And you can clip or pin these together. Remember, they're right sides facing together, wrong sides out. Make sure you keep those folds. Okay, now let's sew along both of these clipped edges at a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have these sewn together, we can open it up, and we're gonna just press that seam allowance open, just like that. We wanna get this nice and flat so it'll be easier to attach in the end of the bag. So just press both of these seams open. All right, so you can take your little loop and set this to the side. Now we're gonna work on the zipper pocket. So take that zipper binding and lay it wrong side up, and let's just fold it in half, long sides together, wrong sides together, and use our iron to press along that midpoint seam, just like this. And then you can open it up and then pull up those long raw edges again, wrong sides together, to meet that midpoint mark you just made by pressing. So we're just making like a double fold binding here. Once you have those both pressed in, you can then take the whole unit and press it in half so that those long raw edges are just hidden inside the fold of this binding. So if you're using zipper tape, make sure you cut your zipper tape down to 12 inches long. That's how long we want it to be total. And I'm just adding the zipper pull onto my zipper tape real quick. There we go. Now take your zipper and lay it right side up, and when the zipper is closed, the zipper pull is going towards the left. Take your binding, and what we're going to do is we're just going to lay our zipper tape into our binding and then fold the binding around the top edge of our zipper tape. So you can have it go right up against the coils, or you can have it so that it's a little bit, you know, like 1/8 of an inch away from the coils. I honestly have it go right up against the coils because my zipper tape is wide enough that it doesn't cover them. If, you know, you wrap this around and you see that it's covering up your coils, then you don't want to do that. You want to just kind of scoot it so that it's about 1/8 of an inch away. You don't want to have to worry about damaging your fabric when you're using your zipper. You can use double-sided tape here as well if that's easier for you. Do this however it's easy. I obviously make these things a lot, so I can just kind of clip this on and sew it. I'm sure most of you can as well. But if this seems like it won't stay in one place, then just grab some double-sided tape or even a glue stick and glue it in place. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to use my zipper foot and I'm going to sew along the bottom edge of this zipper binding at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that top stitched on, just flip it over and make sure you caught the bottom of your binding too. If you get too close to this bottom edge here, you could, you know, miss it. So I just double check and make sure we're good. Okay, so now grab your zipper pocket lining panel, which for me is just the fabric that doesn't have the interfacing on it, and lay it right side up. And then grab your zipper and flip it so that it's upside down. The binding is on the bottom here, but the zipper is right side up. And you're gonna line this up along the top edge of your lining. So right side of zipper is up, binding's on the bottom, right side of lining pocket panel is up, and then just clip along this top edge to hold them together. Now I'm going to quickly baste along this top edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to hold the lining and zipper in place so I don't have to worry about it slipping out in the next step. Okay, so with your lining right side up and your zipper right side up, binding on the bottom, grab your exterior pocket piece and lay it right side down. Now make sure if you have a directional print, the top is along the zipper, okay? So right side down. So it's gonna be right side of exterior against the right side of the zipper. And then just line it up along that top edge and clip in place. All right, so now we're going to sew along this top clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. As you saw I did whenever I was putting the binding on. Move your zipper pull out of the way as you get close to it. Don't try to sew around it. So as you get to the zipper pull, just move it out of the way by lifting up the presser foot, moving the zipper, putting the presser foot back down, and continuing your stitching. You want a nice straight line here. So now that we have it all sewn in place, let's pull our exterior and lining panels so that they are wrong sides together. And let's line up all the edges. Get it nice and straight up here along the zipper. And then we can just grab an iron and press along this top edge to flatten it out right next to the zipper. All right, now that we have this nice and pressed, we're going to top stitch along this bottom edge of the zipper at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now that we have that top stitched on, what I'm actually gonna do is I'm going to baste along this bottom edge here of my pocket. So let me just turn this out. So this bottom edge here of the pocket, I'm going to baste these together at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to hold this in place while we're constructing it with the rest of the bag. Okay, once that's basted, now what we want to do is find the midpoint along this bottom edge. So I'm just going to fold the bottom edge in half, and you can mark this with a marker or just take your scissors and make a teeny tiny clip just to mark that midpoint. You can set this pocket to the side for just a moment. Grab your exterior main front panel. This is where we're gonna put the pocket, and we gotta start marking some lines on this. Okay, so the first thing you wanna do is mark the midpoint along the bottom of your front exterior panel. So I just did that by clipping it with my scissors. And then whatever you mark on the front of here, make sure you mark it with some sort of an erasable marker. So an air erasing marker, a water erasing marker. I'm using this vinyl pen, so it's just, I can just rub this off with, you know, a wet paper towel. It's no big deal. So you're gonna wanna mark in 1/2 inch into the center from these bottom box corners here. And it's gonna be 4 inches tall. And then on the top corners here, you're gonna mark these little L-shaped brackets that are 1/2 inch down from the top and 1/2 inch in from the side of your loop. So both of these here have 1/2 inch down from the top, 1/2 inch in from the loop, the little upside down L. And then only on the front panel, you're gonna mark a straight line, a horizontal line, that is 12 inches up from the bottom of your panel. Now all of this is in the pattern. So if you're like, Jessica, you're going too fast, it's all in the pattern. But you're gonna wanna make these marks on the front panel and the back panel. The back panel does not need this right here. This is just for our pocket. So if you're not doing the pocket on either panel, you don't need to make this horizontal mark here. But all the other marks are gonna be necessary to help you line up your accent straps in just a moment. So now grab your pocket and lay it right side up, so zipper's right side up. Match up the bottom midpoint of your pocket with the bottom midpoint of your exterior front panel, and just line up this bottom edge just like that. And the top of your pocket should come up to that line you marked up here. If it doesn't, it's okay. You just want it to be centered and straight for the most part on your front exterior pocket panel. Now I'm actually going to use some washi tape here to hold down the sides of my pocket. If you're using any sort of cotton material for your exterior, you can use pins here. I mean, you could use pins with vinyl as well, as long as you just pinned it inside here where you're not going to see it in the end. But just remember, pins and vinyl, they poke holes that don't go away. The holes will stay. So now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along the top of my binding right here. And then I'm going to baste along the sides and the bottom to really hold this pocket in place. I'm doing all of this at 1/8 inch seam allowance. Alright, there we go. Isn't that pocket adorable? I love that. So I'm going to add my bag tag just above the pocket. This is totally optional, and you can add it wherever you'd like, but I figured this is a nice place for it. So I'm just going to use a seam ripper to rip the slits for my bag tag. I can just add it in there just like that. That looks cute. Flip it over and add the washer. Push this down. If you want, you can add a piece of interfacing over this to protect the lining. Since my lining is waterproof canvas, I'm not too worried about it. Here we go. Now I have a nice little addition with my bag tag. Okay, once the pocket is done, now we got to attach the accents for our straps. So you're going to grab 2 of your straps and make sure you look where the top is on each one, and they're going to curve into one another. So this strap could go on this side, and this strap can go on this side. This is essentially what it's going to be. But we got to line it up properly. So I'm removing my clips, because remember I also used that glue, so they should stay just long enough for me to attach them. But I'm also going to use some double-sided tape here to help. So I'm actually going to use my heavy-duty double-sided tape, and I'm only going to run it along the center here because I won't be sewing over it. This double-sided tape is fantastic, but it is kind of a nightmare to sew over on a domestic machine. It just gunks up your needles real bad. If you do sew over it, you're going to want to change your needle afterwards. But if you don't sew over it, it's wonderful. So I have my tape there. I haven't removed the paper yet. I just want to lay out where this is going to go. So the outermost, so the left side of my strap, is going to line up with that 1/2 inch mark that's 4 inches tall down here. So the bottom of my strap lines up with the bottom edge. The left side lines up with that mark. And then up here towards the top, my top edge is going to line up with the top of my outer panel. If it doesn't quite reach, that's okay. But I want to make sure the right edge here comes into that little notch we made. So it just should go right into that corner, just like that. So when you line it all up, it looks like this. It's going to cover the edge of my pocket. It's going to come 1/2 inch in from this edge over here, which we want because we're gonna box these corners and we don't want to accidentally sew over this later. So you want to make sure it comes in and then meets that little notch up there at the top. Okay, so once I know how it needs to be, I can flip this over, remove the paper from my tape, and gently lay this down. If you use this tape, just know, once you stick it down, it doesn't come back up. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. So let me add my tape, and I can remove all my clips. So now I can just kind of line this up so I know how it needs to be. It's gonna be right inside that little corner right there. There we go. And then it's going to be along this bottom 1/2 inch mark down here, lining up the top and the bottom. All right, that's all good. So now I can remove the paper from the tape and then just press this down. Isn't that cute? And that just hides those raw edges of our pocket. We don't have to worry about putting seams in there or anything or folding our zipper. I love this. Look how cute that is. Oh, this is gonna be a pretty one. It's gonna be a pretty one. So now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch along both folded edges of both of these straps at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And there we go, look at that. Doesn't that look like a challenging look? But it's actually very easy to do. And then in the end, oh, this is gonna be so cute. I love it. Okay, let's put this to the side for just a moment. Let's work on the back panel. Okay, so for the back panel, you're gonna mark the same lines on the bottom and the top that you did on the front. You just don't have to mark that pocket line right here along the center of the bag. Okay, so I have all my lines marked. I removed the clips and I have my tape on the back. So I'm gonna check for the top markings just to make sure I do this the right way. None of them are upside down. So it's gonna go just like this. So this is a really pretty look, isn't it? If you didn't wanna add a pocket, you don't have to. You could just do this as the front and the back. And it's just a very chic, kind of more simple bag. If you just really wanna show off your vinyl or, I mean, this is a fun, I love this. I love this bag, guys. So let's remove the paper from one of our tapes. I'm just gonna gently line it up along the bottom edge here. And then line it up here at the top as well. Don't pull on it too much so that your whole bag starts to kind of bow up. You don't wanna do that. There we go, you wanna keep it nice and flat. There we go. We do the same thing on the other side. All right, now I have those taped on. They're not going anywhere. So I'm gonna top stitch along both folded edges on both straps at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, there we go. I love that. This combination of vinyl is beautiful. I love this. So now let's set this to the side and work on our lining. So grab both of your lining panels. And the nice thing is, this is it. This is your lining. If you want to add slip pockets, I think a mesh pocket would look really cool right here. If you added a mesh pocket, I would make sure it started 1/2 of an inch above the box corners here, so I would have the base of it run along right here, and you can just stitch it down or you can bind it and stitch it down, and then I would probably have it go up 7 inches. I was planning on showing you how to do that, but I didn't want to throw too much at you guys. But you could definitely add a nice big mesh pocket with individual pockets here. It would be very simple. But I'm just going to show you what the pattern shows you. So like I said, I have 2 different colors of waterproof canvas here. It's not what the pattern recommends. I just didn't have enough of one of them to make it. So that's what we got. So we're going to take our lining panels and we're going to lay them right sides together. And they should line up perfectly because we haven't done anything to them. And now let's just clip along the sides and the bottom. Okay, now let's sew along the sides and the bottom at 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. Don't sew inside these box edges here. So just the sides here and the bottom here. Back stitch right around the boxed edges though. So back stitch right here, right here, right here, and right here. And right here, and right here. So once you have the sides and the bottom sewn, now let's box these corners. So all you have to do is pull along the corners of your box corners. And you're gonna pull these side seams, right sides together. Now if you want, you can finger press these seams open, or you can just have them folded in opposite directions, which is what I'm gonna do. And then I'm going to clip them just like that. And then I'll clip along the edge as well, and over here on the sides to really hold it in place. There we go. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, and I'm just gonna make sure that my seam runs along the same way. So I clipped it to the left down here. So up here I'm gonna clip that same bottom seam to the left. Just try to get this as straight as possible. All right, so once you have both of those bottoms clipped, we're gonna take this back to the sewing machine, and we're just gonna sew along these clipped edges at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have those boxed, you just kind of stand it up, and there is the inside of your bag. It's big, right? It's gonna hold a lot of stuff. I like that. Okay, we can put this to the side. So now let's really just do the same thing with our exteriors. Take your exterior back, lay it right side up. Take your exterior front, lay it right side down. And match up all of the edges. Your straps on the bottom should match up. So if I fold this up, hello, these should match up down here. There we go. So you might want to line those up first and then clip them together. Same thing on the other side. So I clipped along the bottom first, and now I'm going to clip along the sides, just lining up these edges. Okay, just like we did with the lining, we're going to sew along the sides and the bottom at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the tops, at the bottoms, and on the side of the bottom as well. If you're using a thicker vinyl, definitely go over all of these stitches a second time, either right over the stitches or just like a scotch in towards the edges from those stitches to make sure your stitches aren't seen in the end. So I don't think with this vinyl I need to do that, but if it was a thicker vinyl, you definitely do want to double up your stitches. All right, there we go. We have the sides and the bottom sewn together. Now we're going to box these corners. So once again, we're gonna pull at the corners, and you can open up the seam here, or you can just fold the seam in opposite directions, whichever one is easier for you. This bag is so big that it's okay if we fold the seams here, but then we open the seams here later. It'll be okay. I'll go ahead and open these seams since I folded them in opposite directions on the lining. And you really want to get this box corner nice and straight. It shouldn't be that challenging. You should be able to pull down here in the bottom a lot. You should be able to use clips to really get this edge here nice and straight. Go ahead and do this for both of your box corners. All right, so now we're gonna sew along both of these box corners at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I am going to double up my stitching here just because I do have kind of a lot going on. So I'm gonna run over both of these edges twice. There we go. So if you want to trim down your seam allowances, you definitely can. If they're really bulky, if your material's really thick, then just trim them down. I'm okay leaving them at a 1/2 inch. They don't really get in the way. So now you're going to turn your exterior right side out. So here's what it looks like with the boxed bottom. And you can see when you turn it out, hopefully you didn't catch the edge of your accent pieces in the seam. And here is the front, and you can see our design ended up nice and centered. Woohoo! That's great. All right, so that looks so cute, doesn't it? So now we want to attach our straps. To do this, grab one of your straps, and you're going to lay it right sides together with your exterior front panels. So the fold right here, kind of like the thicker single fold, is going to be right side against the exterior when I do this. So I'm just going to rotate this up. And you're going to line this up, not at an angle. See how our accent's at an angle? We're not doing it at an angle. We're gonna line it up straight. So make sure the top edge is straight against the top edge of your exterior panel. It should be the same width as your accent, okay? But it's straight. So when we do it, you see our accent's going off to the side and our handle is coming straight down. So then just rotate your handle, keeping it straight up, and do the same thing on the other side. Just match it up with your accent panel, but keep it straight along that edge. And then just clip it in place. Okay, now let's just sew these handles in place at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, there you go. There's one handle attached. Let's do the same thing on the other side. So now I'm working on the back side. And just like I did before, the single fold part of my handle is gonna go right side against my right side of my back panel. And I'm just gonna line this up with my accent. It should be the same width and it's straight. We're not sewing this on at an angle. And then keeping my handle straight, I'll rotate it up to attach it to the other accent panel as well. All right, now let's just sew these two edges down at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, there we go. Let's just set this to the side for a moment. Okay, so you can use twill tape here, or you can use ribbon. You can use whatever you want for this little, hook that's gonna be attached inside the bag. I'm just using a scrap piece of fun vinyl, and I do have the raw edges showing. If you wanted to hide the raw edges, you could kind of multiply this by 4, double fold it, top stitch, the whole thing. But I'm just gonna use it like this. So I'm gonna thread it through my swivel hook, just like that, so that I pull the pieces wrong sides together, and then I'll just clip it. And now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and top stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from this raw edge right here. And then we're gonna top stitch as close as we can get to the swivel hook. Just make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so now we're gonna hold off on attaching this until a later step, and hopefully I will remember to do it because I forgot to do it on the first bag. Okay, so take your exterior right side out and lay it up and open. And then take your lining with wrong side out, right side in, and we're just going to insert it into our exterior. So the lining and the exterior are wrong sides together. I know, this is pretty big. So let's start with the side seams first. You can press open your seams or you can rotate them in opposite directions. Whichever one is easier for you. Honestly, it's going to be about the same thickness depending on the type of material you're using. So I'm just going to rotate them in opposite directions. So my vinyl is going one way, my waterproof canvas is going another, and then I'm just going to clip them together just like that. Do the same thing on the other side. All right, and then once you have the seams clipped, now we're going to clip along all the edges. So I just line up this top corner by the loop first, clip there, and then I'll clip along this entire straight edge. And then I'll do the other side the same way, and I saved the little loop part here for last. So I have midpoints marked on the bottom edge of this curve from when I was tracing out the pattern to cut out. So I use those midpoint marks and clip along the midpoint first, and then just clip up along the side. You want to use lots of clips here because you don't want this to come apart at the machine, and then you're kind of stretching and struggling to get it all to line up, and that can be very frustrating. So the more clips, the better. So you can see I have that half all clipped. Now I'm going to clip the other half the same way. All right, so now that I have this all clipped, I'm going to baste along this entire top edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to help hold it all together before we attach the next step. The nice thing about basting it at your machine as well is that it gives you kind of like a rough draft, a trial run of how it's going to be sewing on the next step, because it can be a little tricky. So when you baste it, there's less risk there if it's all wonky, messed up, but you can kind of get a feel for how this is going to go. So take your facing loop and fold it out so it's wrong sides out. Take your bag and you're going to slide your facing loop upside down, right sides together with your exterior. So when you do that, it should all line up nice and perfect. These little curves should all line up together. So now just lining everything up, clip your facing to this top edge. So it's raw edge of the facing against raw edge of your vinyl and lining. That folded edge that's basted down here, that's facing down. And the right side of your facing is against the right side of your exterior. So just like we did before, it's easier if you do the seams first. So I'm doing the seams on both sides first, and then the straight edges, and then the curve. All right, here we go. We've got the facing pinned right sides together with the exterior. The folded, edge is down on the bottom here. Now we're gonna sew these together at a 1/2 inch seam allowance along the entire top pinned edge. Once you come to these corners here, make sure you pivot. One thing you might find helpful is to mark a dot that is 1/2 inch from the top edge and 1/2 inch from the side. So that way when you get to that dot, that's where you need to pivot and start going on your curve. So I'm gonna do that for all 4 of these. There we go. Now that I know that can be a little tricky, you just got to go slow. The slower you go, the better. Marking those pivot points is going to be really helpful. So now what we're going to do is we're going to clip these corners. So on these corners here, I'm going to clip them at about a 45-degree angle, and I'm not cutting the stitches, right? I'm getting about 1/8 inch away from the stitches, but I'm not cutting it. And then you can cut down the seam allowance by the handle a little bit to reduce the bulk. There you go. And then we're going to cut little slits into this curve here around the top. This will help it spread out and be nice and smooth. So all the way around. You could also cut the seam allowance down along the entire top edge if you'd like. I might actually go over this entire stitching once more just to smooth out some of these corners and to reinforce the stitching on my handles. And I can still do that even if I trim it down first. Okay, so I have my corners clipped. I've clipped into the rounded part. I am going to go run over all the stitches one more time on my sewing machine because on some of these curves here, it's kind of a little wavy over here, and I want to smooth that out. Going over a second time is going to be very simple. It's also good to go over these handles a second time because there's a lot of beef here and these will get pulled on a lot. The more reinforcement on these, the better. Okay, so now we want to take our facing and we're going to flip it over to the lining. You might want to use a chopstick or a turning tool to help poke out these corners right here where you made your pivots. Don't yank too hard if you're using quilt cotton because you can rip it, so just be gentle. I'm just flipping this all out so that we can see the right side of our facing. And your handles should now be going straight up. Kind of pulling on those should help pull out those corners as well. Our little pivot points are right next to the handles. Okay, so now grab some clips and we're going to push the facing wrong side down against the lining so that we just have a nice clean top edge here. So from the exterior, you can't see the facing. You can only see the facing on the lining. So first we're going to work on this top edge, smoothing it down really nice, and then we'll sew down the bottom edge of the facing as well. So as you can see, I'm just rolling out this top edge and adding clips to get it nice and smooth. Okay, so I have the entire top edge pinned, and during this step I'm also going to insert my little hook. So it's going to be on the back panel in the lining. I'm just going to slide it under that facing into that seam And I should catch it in my top stitching, as long as I have it all the way up there. There we go. So I'll catch that on the top stitching, and then I'll also catch it on the bottom here when we stitch that down. Now, you might notice that right here on the handles, it's very thick. It can be very, very thick depending on the material you used. So I am going to switch to a 90-14 needle, and I'm also going to change the tension on my machine. So normally the tension on my sewing machine is about like a 5.5. I'm going to up it to a 7. Just changing the tension, making it more tension so that I don't get some weird looping down here. But this is very thick here, so you have to be careful as you go over these seams. So now we're going to top stitch along this entire top edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Just go very, very slow while you're doing this. Okay, so I didn't end up catching my little hook during top stitching, which is fine. I can catch it another time. The next time I go around, I'll be going from the lining, so I can definitely catch it on there. So, now that we have the top of the facing stitched in place, we need to stitch down the bottom edge of the facing. Now, you can just pin this or leave this and just manipulate it at the machine, or you can tape it or glue it. I think I am just going to work with it at the machine. I don't want to pin it because if I pin this, it's going to create holes on the front of my vinyl. I could tape it, but honestly, I think it would just come right up. So I'm just going to stitch this down at the machine. So while we're stitching this down at the machine, we're going to be stitching from the inside of the bag. So remember, your bobbin thread is going to show on the front here. So I suggest you use a bobbin thread that matches your vinyl if you don't want it to be that noticeable. And we're going to just stitch down an 1/8 of an inch from this folded edge. So remember, we basted down this folded edge. We're just going to stitch this in place to hold that fold. And then once we're done stitching, we can remove these basting stitches here that run right along this edge, holding our facing in place. There we go. And you can see, since I used my bobbin thread, which was kind of like a white color, you really don't see the thread. You just see, you know, the indentation of the stitches. But it's not really noticeable that like this isn't totally straight or this is a little wonky. You don't see that, so that's great. And then that just stitches down that really cool accent inside. You can see I went over this a couple times just to make sure it's nice and sturdy in there. How stinking cute is that? Okay, so the last thing I want to do is just remove the basting stitches that are on the bottom fold of this little facing piece here. You can just get a seam ripper and rip some of those stitches to pull them out. If it's not noticeable, then you can definitely just leave them. And there you go. Now your bag is done. Isn't that so sweet? It's a big bag, so it seems like it'd be hard, but really the size of it is what makes it the most challenging thing. Not so much building it. All right, you ready to see the final product? Look how beautiful it is. It's so big. I love this. I'm looking at the screen because I'm trying to make sure I get it in the shot. But look how beautiful of a big bag this is. I love big bags. I love big bags. Now, like I said, this is probably not the bag I'm carrying with me everywhere. But when I'm going to the beach, picnic, park, maybe even grocery shopping, like if you want to make this like your grocery tote, this would be a great grocery tote for that. Anytime you need to carry a bunch of stuff, this is such a good, cute bag. This does not look handmade, right? Like, this looks so good. And I love having a pocket in the front. Slip pocket or zipper pocket is fine. I know I like doing the zipper pocket because then if I want to use it like a slip pocket, I just don't close the zipper. But if I really want to make sure, you know, my stuff is tidied up in there and kept safe, then I'll just zip it up. And I was able to get my little attachment up here, so what I can do here is just clip my keys to this, and I don't have to worry about digging underneath the snacks, the towels, the bathing suits, the shoes, the sand, the bazillion shells that the family decided they were collecting this trip to try to find my keys, right? My keys are gonna be right here, clipped to the top, easy to get. I love this, and a lot of these things are things you can do in other bags. I mean, this front pocket here, if you have a big bag, or just a bag that has a nice basic panel on it, this is an easy way to add a pocket. You just stitch it onto it, right? And then add some, you know, contrast or some accent straps in some way. And there you go, easy peasy. They don't have to attach to the straps up here. You can create accents in a lot of different ways. So here they are together. I hope you love these bags. They're so cute. Honestly, I can make so many more, but they do require a lot of material. So if you make this bag, please let me know. Leave a comment down below. Let me know how it goes. If you post it on social media, make sure you tag me. I'm at OklaRoots. Also, make sure you tag Noodlehead. We want to see everything you're making. I cannot wait to see more variations of this. I know we've talked about this a lot, but this would be another great bag to add quilt blocks to. So if you have a bunch of quilt blocks, now I wouldn't make it like a water bag if it's, you know, quilt cotton quilt blocks, but it could be like a great bag to take to your sewing retreats, to take your sewing classes, where you can put a bunch of your fabric, you know, your rulers, your utensils, all your tools can go in this bag, and then you have your like your little rolling case for your sewing machine. This would be cute. Yeah, because you can just put, this would be a cute sewing class bag. Oh, please let me know how you use your bag. I'm so excited. So thank you so much for sewing with me today. Thank you, Noodlehead, as always, for allowing me to use your patterns in my tutorials. I absolutely love them. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.